Hello, and welcome back to Things I Want My Kids to Know with me, Ted Bradshaw. Today, we're going to talk about being present. And frankly, we're talking about that because I don't feel like I'm doing it very well at the moment. But even that phrase, like doing it well, being present well, what does that mean? And what's realistic? That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. But then we're also going to talk about four strands of things that you can do to help yourself to be more present if that is something that you would like from yourself. But first, let's talk about why it happens and a little bit about what those realistic expectations are. So, what's going on for me right now is we've had a lovely summer break. I'm going to put this podcast out today. So, as I'm recording it, it's going to go out later this afternoon. So, you're hearing this from me live, if you like. I was off last week. I had a week at work the week before that, and I was off the week before that as well. So, what I've experienced is that while I was away, I've found it reasonably easy, I would say, to be more present with my kids, with my family. But when I was at home and I was working, my out of office was not on, if you like, I noticed, and I still notice, in the last few days, that I'm finding it difficult to be fully in one place or the other. So they're in the house now. So hopefully you're not going to hear them, but I won't guarantee that because there's my three kids at home and my nephew is here as well. So fair play to my wife fielding all of that. She's an absolute sort of legend at it, I would say. While I'm working. But while I am working, I don't think this is true of when I'm doing my one-to-one client work. I can always be present there. Maybe there's something about that for us to talk about. Why is that easier? But when I am doing like the admin stuff or something like this, which feels, I would say, optional, something I could move if I wanted to, even though really, I have an expectation of myself to get one of these out every Friday, that it is hard for my mind to be fully on my work because I'm aware that my kids are downstairs and maybe part of me feels guilty or is wondering how they're getting on or wondering how my wife is getting on. There is also when I go downstairs and, we've just had lunch, for example, I'm really aware that when I'm with them, my head is not fully with them either. And it's not fully with them when the end of the working day comes either. I kind of go to be with them, but it's like I've left part of myself up here in this office. Like my mind is off somewhere else. Sometimes I couldn't even tell you where it is. I couldn't even specify what it is that I am feeling mildly stressed or worried about or just thinking over. It's just that my mind isn't on what is happening right in front of me. And I think that happens quite a lot. So part of the question would be, well, how come there are times, either during the day or during the week or during the year, so maybe when you're on holiday, for example, how come there are times when you can be slightly more present? One of the things I will always say, because I think it's true, is I'm a better parent outside of the house than in the house. And what I mean by that is I find it easier to be present, to be fully kind of engaged in what's going on when we're out and about doing stuff. I find it harder when I'm at home. So maybe being on holiday is just being in a different place. There's something about the environment which I think is worth us talking about. The second thing, aside from environment, is permission. So those two things as a combination, sometimes I can switch off when the kids are in bed. It's a little easier to be more present in the room, maybe with my wife, when the kids are in bed. And maybe particularly like post 9 p.m, because I think there's a mentality in my mind that I have permission after 9 p.m. to not have to do anything. I don't have to be working on anything or pushing forward with something. Whereas perhaps during the day, if we're at home, even if it's not work-based, there's part of me that's thinking about, that radiator that needs that needs looking at, or maybe we need to look at the mortgage or whatever it is, all the little tasks that are there. If I'm away from the house, I'm staying somewhere else, those things just simply aren't there. So it is easier to let go of needing to think about them. Or maybe there's something about the environment that allows you to do something more sensory, to be out of your head. So one of the things that we did we had some English holidays, so we were in Northumberland for a week, and then we went to the Isle of Wight for a week, and we happened to be able to be on the beach most days when we were in the Isle of Wight, and I really noticed that, again, I felt like I was in it. I felt like I was there. I wasn't off somewhere else in my head. I was there. And there's so much sensory on the beach. So I was watching my kids splash around, or I was in the water with them, or it's made up of really tiny pebbles where we go. And one of my daughters really loves finding sea glass, like little bits of glass that's been rounded and moulded by the sea. And there's just loads of it, little tiny bits. And it's such a mindful thing to do. You're sort of panning through these little pebbles to try and find these little bits of sea glass. So there's something about that environment that's just a little bit easier to keep me in the room, if you like. So I think there's lots of different reasons why you might find it hard to be present. That's even just on everyday stuff. Never mind when you've got a big worry going on. So I don't know, let's say there's some financial concerns, or there's a health worry hanging over your head, or you're concerned about how a family member is doing, or whatever it might be. It is reasonable for there to be stuff going on in the back of your mind, or even the forefront of your mind, and for you to find it hard to push that to one side or to let it drift into the background while you're trying to concentrate on speaking to a loved one or doing some exercise or whatever it is that you're trying to do. For me, this is kind of job number one with trying to be present, is accepting that you might not be. Accepting that you might not be, and that might not be you doing it wrong. That might be simply that this isn't a situation, or it isn't something that's realistic or reasonable to be able to let go of completely. So if we take the small examples of everyday stuff, so I'm downstairs, I'm with my family, why might it be reasonable that part of my mind is on what should I be doing? Should I be, doing that DIY thing? Should I be looking at that financial thing that I know needs renewing? Should I be looking at the car tyres? Or like whatever it is. Yes. They don't just disappear because my son asks me to play a board game with him. They don't just disappear because we've sat down to have lunch. Those things still exist. And if I don't think about them at all, it's going to cause me some problems. If we take the bigger stuff, it's even more understandable. So is it reasonable that when I am sitting with somebody I care about, or I'm just trying to engage in a hobby or something that I want to do, that there are thoughts hanging around in the background about, is that health thing definitely going to be okay? Or how's my mum getting on? Or whatever it is that the worries are about. I think sometimes we have an unrealistic or unfair expectation that we should be able to laser focus and be present, kind of regardless of what's going on. So we judge our success at that based on how present we've been, rather than giving ourselves a context and say, you know what, considering everything that's been going on, how am I doing here? And that maybe if I'm 70% present or 50% present, maybe that's reasonable given the circumstances, actually. That's not only important to do because it's, fair. It's also important to do because there is a practical effect that can have. When we are feeling something or having some thoughts sort of drag us around, but we're annoyed about it and we feel like we shouldn't do, what we will reach for is ways of pushing it away. So that might be that I'm sat in the lounge trying to be with my kids. I'm feeling the nerves. I don't want to feel the nerves, so I'll reach for something that's going to make it go away. And the most effective things that I have for that are typically quite unhelpful. So reaching for my phone. So I'm technically in the lounge with my kids, but I'm on my phone. The anxiety's gone away because I'm just distracting myself, but I'm not present either. In a way, trying not to feel the anxiety or the stress or whatever it is that's going on for you will make you reach for things that aren't always helpful. If you're able to say, you know what, today I'm probably going to be a bit distracted and those things are going to be on my mind, maybe I can give myself permission to not have to get rid of it, but just to say, yeah, I'd like to be fully in this board game. I really would, but part of my mind is not. Or I'd love to sit and have lunch with my kids and be completely 100% relaxed and, forget about everything I've got going on until this afternoon. Maybe that's not reasonable. Maybe if I can give myself permission, I can say, I'll be here as best I can, but part of me is elsewhere. Maybe I don't have to push it away. Maybe I can just let it be. There we are. So, success in this is not getting to a point where those thoughts and feelings don't pop up, because it's not completely in your control. Success is, I don't know where I was going to go with that sentence. I think success in trying to be present is, have I done my best given the circumstances? That's maybe a more realistic expectation. Let's talk about how you might do that. So it's all well and good wanting to try and do your best, but how? So, 4 strands. Things that you can do about your environment to give yourself the best chance of being present. Things that you can do with your mind. So what do you do with the thoughts when they sort of start crowding in? Things you can do physically, because one of the things that particularly happens to me when I'm not being present is, I don't know, I've got this tension in my stomach. I almost hold my stomach tense, like I'm trying to impress somebody on the beach or something like that. Like I'm holding it tense. And then behaviour is some of the other things that we'll talk about, is what are some of the practical things you can do. So let's start with environment. First of all, it's worth paying attention to the times and the places where you do feel slightly more present. So as I've said, I can be more present on holiday, which is fine, but I can't be on holiday all the time. But there might be something about what it is, about what I get from holiday that I don't get maybe at home. Maybe there's some clues in there. It might be worth thinking about the idea that I find it easier to be present when I'm outside of the house. Now, you can say to yourself, all right, but again, you can't be outside all the time, and that is fair enough. But what I can say to myself is, yeah, but it is all right for me to find it easier. It's all right for me to find it easier outside. Can I use any of that? What do I get from being outside that I don't get from being at home? What is it? And can I use that a little bit? So, just as an example, I've described to you some of the stuff about being away was maybe that the things that we were doing involved more sensory activity. So sitting on the beach, combing through it for some sea glass, or being in the waves, or just watching my kids be in the waves. That's interesting, just saying that out loud actually, because while we were on the beach, I wasn't always directly involved with my kids, but I did find watching them really kind of calming, actually, as long as they weren't fighting, which they did less on the beach, to be fair. However, at home, sometimes I think I'm berating myself because I feel like I should be involved with them all the time. And that's maybe my definition of being present, whereas maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's all right for my definition of being present with my kids, for me to just be observing them sometimes and to not have to be involved. Actually, that's worth saying. So something about the environment. I noticed that in sensory environments tend to be easier. I notice that it is easier when I'm physically distant from the tasks, the tasks that are floating around my head. I find it easier when I'm not there. I also find it easier when my phone is not in reach. So if my phone is in reaching distance, I find it harder to maintain this idea that I'm just not going to reach for it and distract myself. Again, you could argue, well, shouldn't you just do that with pure willpower? I mean, you know, maybe, but A, again, not realistic. B, that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to find it easier when it's not there. So the choice to leave my phone in my office when I go downstairs would be a good example of trying to set up my environment to give myself a slightly better chance of being present. Not that I always do it. Being in a space that's different, I can't always do. So during the summer holidays, my kids are likely to be at home, particularly around meal times. I will go downstairs. My mind will still be on work because I've got stuff that I meant to do in the morning I didn't get round to. I've got more things that I need to do in the afternoon, and part of my mind is going to be on those things. What can I do about my environment to give me the best chance of being as present as I can? I think some of that is kind of communicating with my wife in particular. Just, you know, I'll do my best to be present, but part of me is thinking about work. Of course it is. Part of me is over there. But I'll do my best. Some of that's giving myself permission to not get it perfect all the time. And there's something about permission, isn't there? But also a really interesting thing, or a really useful thing to think about environment, is changing the usual scenery. So what I mean by that is, if my wife's got an errand to run and partway through my working day, we're going to, or I'm just going to take them for a bit, but part of my mind is just on the work. Let's make sure that I do something that kind of gives my body a bit of a clue that this is different. So if I just go and sit on the sofa or at the dinner table, where so many times I have been there being distracted, can I choose an environment that feels different? A playful environment can be quite a helpful thing to do. So for example, if I'm going to take them outside in the garden, we do have a trampoline. Can I go on the trampoline? If we're inside and they're playing with a marble run or some Lego or something, can I get down on the floor with them and view it from that angle? I am lying down. It's kind of harder for my body to be in kind of work mode when I am lying down, when I'm stretched out on the floor, playing with stuff in that way. So using your environment, make it as easy as you can to be a little bit more present. Second thing, your mind. What can you do with your mind? If the thoughts are kind of crowding in on you and you keep, for me, it's not like fully formed sentences. It's just this general sense that I should be doing something and this general urge to just get back to the tasks at hand, if you like. So it's not always a fully formed sentence, if you like, but still, there are two things that I think are helpful to think about. One is accepting that the thoughts are there without getting sucked into them, to sort of noticing them but not getting sucked into them. So if it's like a swarm of bees, like a buzzing bees, just being able to notice, like, okay, this swarm's going to come with me, but I don't have to turn around and look at it if I don't want to. I can just see that it's there and imagine it drifting away a little bit. Sometimes it helps for it to not dominate. It's still there, but it's not taking center stage. Or saying to your thoughts, thank you very much. I will come back to you in a minute. Genuinely, that's quite helpful. So sometimes I will say to myself, okay, thank you very much. I will come back to you at 1 o'clock. I might have to say it a few times with this general sense of worry or with specific worries. I'll come back to you at 1 o'clock. But for now, I'm going to concentrate on my kids or my wife or whatever it is I'm trying to focus on. So, just noticing the thoughts and finding a way to keep them at a distance, to not get dominated by them, to not get sucked in by them. The second thing you can do with your mind is focus your attention on what's going on around you. So, when you notice yourself kind of going into your own head, so how I would describe it when I'm not being present is it is literally as if the lights are on but nobody's home, which I'm sure my wife would tell you is no, it doesn't only happen when I'm when I'm distracted by work, but it's like I'm not really there. Like there's an avatar of me in the kitchen and part of me is somewhere else. So where that is my attention has gone inward. It's gone back into all the ideas or tasks or things that I've got to do. And what I'm not is fully engaged in what's happening in front of me. So just practicing, noticing what's going on. So one of the things that will happen is I won't look people fully in the eye. So my kids will be talking to me and I'll reply with like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But I'm not really looking at them. I'm not really engaged. It is helpful to purposefully put your attention where you want it to be. So if you want it to be upon your kids, upon your partner, upon the activity that you are trying to do, look at it. Put your attention on it. Pay attention to what you see, what you hear, the feel of a kitchen table underneath your fingers, that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll reach out and touch my kids' heads. They don't mind that at the minute and that's fine, but that's one way of me doing that, keeping my attention outside of my own head. So, we've got environment, do what you can there. Mind, keeping the thoughts, just acknowledging them, not getting dominated by them, and focusing your attention on what's going on. The third and fourth are the physical things you can do to help yourself with your kind of body, and then behaviour. So what are some things that you can do, which really goes in line with what we've said already. But let's start with the physical stuff. So physically, one of the things that's very helpful to do is whenever you are off somewhere else, often you're feeling tense. And while you're feeling tense, that kind of drives you to want your thoughts to return to the things that your body is telling you should be thinking about. So sometimes it's just helpful to try and focus on calming your body. Simple things of breathing. Just taking some deep breaths to try and calm things down. But my favourite, I think, beyond the breathing stuff, is moving and speaking more slowly and more purposefully. So sometimes that almost sounds like I'm putting on a little bit of a voice when I'm talking to my children in particular, because I am kind of trying to be thoughtful. So instead of like, oh, how's your day? I'll say, now then, how has your day been thus far? Or so far. Thus, I like thus. Let's stick with thus. In doing that, it does two things. One, speaking more slowly and more purposefully helps my body slow down and unclench. I know I've said it before and I'll say it again. Moving and speaking more slowly helps it unwind a little bit. I covered this in the social anxiety episode that I did as a bonus episode. Moving and speaking purposefully. That's particularly helpful when you know you've got this sense of urgency, this sense of rush. And that's what's making it hard to be present, because you feel like you've got all these things to do, but I've got 20 minutes to take care of my children here, and I want to be present with it. I don't just want to be counting down the minutes until I can get back to my desk. Maybe if I move more purposefully and slowly, actually it helps me not get sucked into the I've got to be going kind of thing that my mind wants me to do. Moving and speaking more slowly. Finally, let's talk about behaviour. So, what kinds of activity tend to make it easier to be present? It won't come as a surprise that the main thing that I'm going to say is sensory things. So anything that involves your senses. Now it's kind of not enough, I'd say, to do something that involves your senses. It's also helpful to try and focus on those senses as well. So maybe it's a combination of behaviour and mind. But as an example, when I gave the example of lying down on the floor with my kids, part of that is a physical sensation that I'm in a different position. I am laid down on the floor. I can feel the carpet underneath my skin. I can feel the Lego blocks in my hand satisfyingly clicking into place, I have to say. Or if it's a marble run or whatever it is that they're doing, just focusing on what I can feel, moving my body in a particular way. I think that's a big part of why I find it easier when we're outside. Usually when we're outside, we're walking somewhere, we're kicking something, we're picking something up, we're getting involved physically, and I find that a lot easier to be present. Similarly to when I'm, doing a workout or something, it's easier for me to just be concentrating on that one thing because there's something for my attention to kind of hook onto, I would say. That's why walking can be helpful sometimes. So going for a walk, your feet are sort of plodding. Sensory things. That might be hot or cold. So if you're struggling to do it when you're sat at the dinner table, struggling to be present, hold something that's warm on the table or something that's cold. Have a really ice cold drink with it and feel it in your hands, that kind of thing. Do sensory things and that'll make it a little bit easier to be present for longer. And I suppose that'd be how I'd want to wrap this up. It's kind of a message to myself really, as much as to anybody else, which is you can know all of this stuff and you can do all this stuff and you still might not be fully present all the time. And that's okay, because maybe that's an unfair expectation. You got stuff to do. It is all right that your mind finds that hard to let go of when you're trying to put it down. It's okay. It's all right for that to be there. You're not failing if you feel like you're not present all the time. That's what I want to leave you with. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.